Hello and welcome to the Attention Mechanism. My name is Justin Robert Young, joined as always by the one and only Andrew Main. How you doing, buddy?
Fantastic.
Very excited because we're gonna be able to hang out this week in person in glittering Las Vegas, Nevada for Freedom Fest. You're going to be speaking there. You got a big debate on Saturday. So if there's anybody listening to us that's going to be at Freedom Fest, make sure you come up and say hi. We always love meeting cool people, but we have a buffet worth of AI news here. It was not a dream. Fable indeed did come back into everybody's lives late last week, and just as quick, it's going to be gone from Anthropic subscription plans. They say it'll eventually be back when they have enough compute. We will discuss what happened with Fable, what it is, what it isn't, and what it means to be API only after Tuesday. We will also touch on some Chinese model, open source models. What does it mean to build on them in our current world, our current climate? And some 5-6 predictions, some sovereign wealth fund talk. Mr. Main, where do you want to start?
Well, I think let's talk about Fable. So, finally it's out. It's great. People love the model. Unfortunately for, users, they've noticed it's not the same performance as it was before because of the classifiers and things that Anthropic had to do to get that release. But still a great model. Still vibes are great. People loving it. It seems like a big step up, and that's great. And overall for AI, and I'm confident that they will improve. Performance will get better. Like classifiers. The classifier way that works is, it has to look at an input or an output or something mid-process to figure out if it's doing something it's not supposed to, which often means it may decline. And historically, it was just to say, I can't do that, Dave. Now it just says, I'm just going to have you use my dumber model, which might actually be really capable of doing it, which is sort of a funny thing. It's like, okay, you just can't do it with this. If it happens here, I can't sell you these kids these fireworks, but the gunpowder's over here. Yeah,
if it, and in these cases, it's like, biology, weapons grade biology, or they had the controversy about machine learning before, like it'll determine in the bucket of a thing that you're not supposed to do, and because the capabilities of Mythos or Fable are what they are, they're just going to say, no, we're going to put you down to Opus 4.8, right?
Yeah, which in a harness could probably solve many of those problems too. So, but anyhow, I do think that over time, I think it will get smarter again. Fable will be more capable of doing what you want. Anthropic is smart. They'll have a lot of good data. And I think that the performance hit that people have seen over time, I think it'll start to get better. I would be surprised to see if it doesn't, 3 months from now, 4 months from now, if they're not seeing better performance than when it launched, if they do updates to it in 0.2 and 0.3 updates. Unless they have like really, really severe prompt hacks and other stuff that makes it really, it's even, these fixes aren't enough.
Obviously international news with the export controls. What have we learned at the end of all this? What is different?
So I am very much probably always the optimistic kind of guy in a lot of things. And I would say, here's the thing. We've talked about this before. We've talked offline. There was going to be an inevitable collision between people in preparedness, which is the people who work on trying to prepare the government and safety and whatnot, and the government. It was going to happen. And there wasn't like any necessarily way to do around it. And a lot of like, oh, well, we can talk to policymakers. Cool. Guess what? At the, at the executive level, the policymakers you spoke to 20 months ago, they aren't in office anymore. And this was a new set of policymakers, which you weren't talking to. And that was part of the problem, I'd say, for Anthropic was, I would say they were talking to one set of policymakers and one category of people and not the other. And then they got caught off guard by an election didn't go the way they expected. And I think that that can be the changing state for many things, is that you can spend a lot of time in, I have friends that I know that no senator has been spending, like, great. And then when that senator gets voted out, you have to start that over again.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I have years ago, I advocated what you really want to do is kind of go after staffers and other people, the people who are kind of perennially there in DC, to get them more updated, not necessarily for insider advantage, but just get them much more into the conversation and stuff. So when administrations start pulling people and staffing people, they're coming in
you
informed.
Have somebody who understands your perspective. Yeah.
So, but where we are now is that Anthropic had to learn really fast, who to send, and what to say, and not what. I was going to say
very, very fast might be a elastic term, but they certainly found out who to send and who specifically not to send.
Yeah, and I would say that they seem to, the Trump administration had nice things to say about where negotiations were now and what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I would say that there is a dialogue. They both need each other. Not just Anthropic, the U.S. government, the American AI industry. It is propping up the economy. Okay.
Yes.
And I would say this administration understands economics, which is good, which isn't always a given. And so they know Anthropic is a major American company. Okay. One of the biggest success stories there is. And they need them to be successful, but they also need to figure out that medium of which they can talk and get. And I think there is a lot more alignment there on safety and stuff like this. The Pentagon alignment was the issue of the Pentagon's like, we need to win wars. Can we count on you to win a war? And if they're like, well, I don't know. And you're like, oh, okay, that's not good. But I think it's a much better place going forward. The Commerce Department has sort of stepped forward to say, hey, we're going to facilitate this. We're going to be the ones that will figure out how we'll do model performance evaluations. We have industry partners. We looked at, Anthropic stepped up. And Amazon stepped up to say, hey, this is an issue, even though it was against their interests, whatever. I think there's a bit more buy-in. I think there's a lot more talking, but I am again, people in the middle of it or in DC right now are probably screaming at me going like, no, it's a mess. I believe you, but also sometimes you have to stand outside to say, okay, you're all in the same room now yelling at each other. And it sounds louder, but you're in different rooms yelling at each other. Now you're all in the same room yelling at each other, and you think that it's worse, but actually at least you're there. So I think they're in the right room. Everybody's yelling together. And I am positive that this is going to move forward. How do I know this? Fable's getting released. Okay.
Yeah.
I expect, it would not surprise me if we may see the DOJ stuff, that we may see the DOW stuff change, with the Department of War stuff change. We may see some changing there, given that they're now learning how to speak each other's language and learning how to cooperate. Wouldn't surprise me if that changes and we get a resolution there too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that'll be a bridge that we will get to at a certain point, but I certainly hope so. I mean, obviously, I think for Anthropic's case, they would certainly want the lingering idea of a supply chain designation, the supply chain risk designation eliminated before their IPO. So I would hope that there was something that could be reached before then.
I don't think we're seeing any IPO from OpenAI or Anthropic anytime soon. I don't
think so? Because that was the thought was it was this fall, coming this fall.
Yeah, and then we had SpaceX IPO in its yo-yo behavior. And then there's a lot of there's some financial stuff where trying to get loans, like SpaceX has tried to get basically, I would say the tail with the grin. We've heard OpenAI has decided to postpone because of this. And I wouldn't be surprised if Anthropic decides to postpone. And we've heard that SpaceX had its IPO, but there's a lot of wait and see there too, because it had, which skyrocketed up, great shares, then fell back down. And now it's, it's above where it came out at, but it's not like a super successful one. We'll see. I would say that I don't think anybody knows. I think people would be nice to have, but they're going to be waiting to see where the climate is and whatever.
The word that was reported, and I'm going to repeat words that I don't fully understand. I think I kind of a little bit understand.
You and I have made careers of this.
I know that the bonds that were being sold on SpaceX's debt were not being purchased at the rate that the banks would have hoped. And so that is a sign that, there's not as much faith, or that there's been too much debt that's been brought on, and SpaceX does not have the revenue engine currently to offset it. Now, that's a bit of a different scenario than Anthropic and OpenAI, who have tremendous revenue engines right now. They're just spending and investing far more than they are taking in. Although I guess technically on paper, Anthropic showed a profit in Q2, but even they said that was not anything that you should expect long term. But yeah, we will see. I'm curious to see if Anthropic still tries to push out this year, because that had been, there'd been a lot of conversation about whether or not it was worth it to have a first mover advantage. Anthropic and OpenAI were kind of racing each other.
Yeah, the challenge is like, one, what is the appetite for the market? Where does pricing land? Where does it go? And do you there is an argument to say that Anthropic knows its numbers are kind of, their numbers compared to OpenAI look really good now, but they may not be the same in several months, and there's an argument that like Anthropic, a lot of the eye-popping numbers they had about code usage and Claude Code and all that, I would say probably still great. We've seen the demand, but I would say that the codex is surging. Demand for these things has got much more competitive, and so there's an argument to be made that they'd be better off just trying to an IPO sooner. But to your point, the earlier point, like the DOW thing, they want to get that resolved, and it wouldn't surprise me. Like the DOW said, like they've been removing Anthropic, as much as they can from where they can, which means to say like you can get a situation where the whole thing can be dropped, but then they could say like, yeah, we're just not going to use Anthropic. Like we prefer you not. Situation and based upon cultural what have you sort of thing. So we'll see. Overall, very good news for Anthropic. Very, very good news. Very good news for Anthropic users. Fable being back out there, getting this resolved. And I would say that it was fast compared to other things. I would say that historically these things can go on long times, and administrations have often tried to punt these sort of things. But I'd say that we're in a situation there where it's better situation. But storm clouds.
Well, so this is the big question, because the export controls got in the way of what was one of the big fine print moments for the Fable launch, which was don't get too used to it if you are even on their highest tier subscription service, because it's not going to be there for very long. And it came back last week. It's going to be gone possibly by the time that you listen to this podcast, if you take a little while, on Tuesday, because it's going to be going to API only on July 7th. And it kind of makes me wonder how much it's going to get used, because those are two kind of different markets. And there's been a few people that have looked at exactly how many tokens you get on a subscription level, like, AKA how subsidized the tokens are, because you get a lot more than what you would get in an API. I think they're different markets to a certain extent, but let me ask you this: is Fable going into API only going to be looked at as the first big moment of the end of the subsidized token era? This is something that's talked about a lot.
I don't know that all tokens are subsidized. I'll put it that way. And also like that when it comes to this, I think the problem is, Anthropic is extremely compute resource. Fable's a big fat model. It's a big model.
Yeah.
And so it comes down to more of a resource constraint. I don't know if it's necessarily a way to try to drive people, because it's not like your subscriber, it's not like, great, what do I do API? I think it is a severe constraint on compute, not the cost of compute, the availability of compute, just not have enough compute to be able to serve it. I think that they will work for ways to try to do it. I expect that they may figure out Fable Lite or whatever and do all those sorts of things, because they need to figure that out. And because they know the OpenAI Resurgent 5.6 is coming, maybe tomorrow. 5.6 capability wise, is it Fable capable in every task? I don't know, but people using it love it, and it seems very capable. And if they built, Soul, the Soul model, if Soul is, they say it's going to be priced at 5.5.
Yeah.
Which implies that it's going to have roughly the same compute constraints. And 5.5 has been, if you're an OpenAI Codex user, reset time, St. Tebow, just pop into the resets. That's going to be, and they have Ultra is coming too. Ultra is like their super, super high level using multiple Soul agents. And they've said that will be in Codex. So that's going to be.
Tebow was out over the last 24 hours saying that Ultra will be in Codex.
Which, holy cow, that is not Anthropic's problem right now. Isn't the cost of tokens, it's the availability of compute, because they could play price war too, but it just and the thing we keep hearing repeatedly from OpenAI people was this was the year you start to see the real compute advantage come in, both with inference and then with training and more compute coming online. And some of the stories they talk about, like, oh, they shut down this plan for Stargate here, whatever, like literally had to do with the fact that the GPUs were going to be ready faster than the concrete got poured, and they wanted to move them places where they'd be used. And I think people misunderstood. And these things,
they have a prime shelf life because new chips are coming out. So it's like the time to use the chips that they have right now.
You want it the moment it steps out of the factory, because otherwise it's like literally you're better off just shipping it off to some facility. And I think people kind of don't understand a lot of the mechanics of that. So anyhow, it's gonna be an interesting situation for Anthropic. I think for most users aren't going to care. Most users are going to be fine. Most users, doing a lot of their daily stuff with Claude, you'd be happy,
Yeah.
So, is it really going to be this? Oh my God! Oh no! I don't know.
Can I just say though, as being the dumbest person on the show, like, the more impressive the model, the more you have an onboarding into a lot of this world that you weren't going to have before. Like there's a lot of models that have a lot of capabilities that can do a lot of really good stuff, and like information retrieval and doing email stuff and chief of staff stuff and all that. Like Opus is plenty capable for that. But when you talk about, can I vibe code the app, the one task app that I've always dreamed of, I don't know anything about coding. Like, that's where 5.5 really unlocked things that other models didn't. And because it was that cracked at doing things, like it was truly a revelation. I think Fable gives a lot of people that ability as well. The difference is that it is a very expensive model. There's a reason why Anthropic's putting it API only. Now they say, to be fair, Anthropic says that it will come back to subscription when they have the compute.
Yeah,
I find that to be dubious.
No, I 1,000% believe it. Oh,
well, hold on. Let me finish it. I think that they will have a Fable capable model on subscription. I don't know if it will be exactly what they have now. And I think the biggest problem is, are they going to be in a situation like right now? They keep building bigger and bigger models. So are they always going to have their biggest model available on subscription in the way that OpenAI seems to be committed to doing so? I don't know if that's going to be the case.
Oh, there's a price that they'll make it work on a subscription. So I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that it'll be available for subscription. Will you get much time with it? Will you get, will it be short window blocks? They're getting more compute every day. They have been making, I had a friend, not an AI, at a company our listeners have never heard of, but a big player in robotics who, had to go buy a couple $100 million worth of compute. And they were trying to chase down anything that Anthropic hadn't already picked up. And if you're trying to buy, it literally people don't realize how compute's scarce. Like this, are we overbuilding? Oh, talk to anybody who's trying to, build right now. Like there's just not like you're planning, like Anthropic just signed a data center deal. It's like for 20 years into the future. So I think the plan is to bring Fable, or maybe they'll make Fable more efficient, whatever. There's a lot of overhang out there. Like there's, people keep noticing that OpenAI tokens seem to be way more efficient than anybody else's tokens. And officially nobody said why. It just seems like they do more.
There have been rumors that there was a massive breakthrough a couple months ago About the time that me and you both noticed that every OpenAI employee we talked to had a stupid grin on their face.
Yeah, and there were other stuff too. Like there were other things and experiments. They've been, they've been at this for a long time and doing a lot of experiments on efficiency and stuff. And I remember working there, things that were like, hey, we're trying this thing now that are now industry standards. And then this happened several years later. Industry said, oh, we should all do this. I would say that some of the really keys, there have been some companies not based in the US have been given credit for discoveries that were known inside certain labs that then certain people left said labs. And then these discoveries popped up elsewhere. And it was very, very irritating. Like there's a few years from now, there's going to be a whole book going to be written about this. Like
about this moment in history. No, it's certainly an inflection point. I think anybody who's touched Fable loves it. Yeah. That it is incredibly intelligent. It is its one-shot ability on really complex tasks is phenomenal. I would imagine that that's the same with Mythos. Obviously, there's a reason why they have seen the long horizon capabilities be so majestic. Which brings us to 5.6, because that is kind of the big, that we're in the race for pinks. Who's got the belt today doesn't mean that they're going to have it tomorrow kind of world. And as Fable has had a big rollout, although a bit of a troubled one, after a week's reset, it looks as if, by all indications, that 5.6 Sol, Terra, and Luna will be rolling out. 5.6 Ultra apparently coming possibly with it, possibly soon afterward. Refer to rumors of multiple different releases this week. What gets released this week, Maine, from OpenAI?
Oh, I think we're going to see Sol, Terra, and Luna. I think that happens. And then we'll see with Ultra is supposed to be the one that is more of an agent orchestrator. We get these. I think they come out. It's going to be, it's looking at the metrics. And again, now it's really, really, really hard to sort of look at a lot of these metrics now because they are comparing, because labs will choose them, will choose different metrics based upon where things look good. And we've also had some issues too. There were a couple big benchmarks, by the way, like Frontier Math, where models sort of seemed like they weren't getting better. And then people went in and looked at the Frontier Math the problems and realized they were wrong. And so think about this. Not only is it a metric where it had wrong answers, if you were trying to benchmax or optimize your model towards that benchmark, you would literally be creating a model that was going to be giving bad. It was going to be bad. And it was you're going to cap, which is one of the reasons why certain labs like OpenAI, they have their own benchmarks they use to optimize around, because their goal isn't to say, oh, we want to go step on the stage and show, look, we beat everything here. The primary goal isn't to do that. The goal is to build a great model, and hopefully it beats out those benchmarks. But I would say
there was a moment, and I don't think we had the chance to talk about this, but the episode's out now. But our benchmark episode of the OpenAI podcast with Tejal Patwardhan, she mentioned that the benchmarks folks have a basket in the way that the core inflationary index has a basket of benchmarks. And that's generally what they use, is that they are not, that was their way of trying to get around the idea of like, okay, we need to make sure that everything we release is benchmax, or we're tempted toward benchmaxing. It's like, no, we want it to be robust based on these specific things, and that they're going to judge the overall trajectory of the models based on its increasing intelligence from those, which I thought was a fascinating way to go about it.
There is a historical parallel, which I'll bring up here just so I can lay credit to it. And I brought this up to a couple people in AI. And the danger, they talk about Goodhart's law and whatnot. You are what you try to optimize for. And if you're optimizing towards a benchmark that has flaws in it, then you're creating a model that will never achieve a certain level of performance. This is apocryphally, but like the Wright brothers were one of many people trying to achieve powered flight. And at the time, you had the U.S. government backed the Smithsonian. There was these efforts. There were hundreds of people around the world trying to achieve this, big effort, small efforts, whatever. And nobody was able to succeed at it. The Wright brothers succeeded. And one of the reasons came down to, besides, Ohio people should not be like underestimated, and lifelong virgins too, probably, is that kind of autist sort of, determination. Don't bet against it.
Yeah.
Apparently, when they had looked up the flight tables and they built the Wright Flyer and they took it to Kitty Hawk, and they're like, the math was great, everything was right, and they went to fly and it didn't fly. They're like, this should have flown. They're like, this should have flown.
Yeah.
They went back, they looked at everything, every measurement, everything they did, everything, weighed everything, all this sort of stuff. What did we get wrong? And the only thing they couldn't control for were the flight tables, the aerodynamic tables, which explained like what wing shape ideal would should be. And these were professionals done by experts, by physicists. They were biomechanics. So they said, we've tested everything except for that. They built their own wind tunnel, and the flight tables, the aerodynamic tables were wrong. They changed it based on their own math, went out, redesigned the wing, went out, it flew. Then it was a big secret. That was one of the reasons it was sort of a big secret, was people kind of like retrospect, like, what's the big deal? Why were they so protective about their patents and stuff? Like, well, it wasn't just put a motor on an airplane. That shape, they went through considerable effort to figure that out. And, they probably should have licensed it, what have you. But the point was, though, they figured it out because they decided to stop optimizing for the thing they couldn't control. And they went for a benchmark that they understood. And I think that's where we're in the AI race right now, is if you're trying to optimize around something else, you run the risk of not being at the frontier.
Do we get the new voice model, the new voice assistant, rather? I mean, we have the new voice model that's out, but do we get the biddy bidirectional?
Maybe, probably. I think we're going to get a lot of, OpenAI people publicly talking about where Codex and ChatGPT are going and all that. And I don't think those differences are just going to be cosmetic. It's not just, and we moved the buttons here. So, we know that there is so much capability right now. And I don't know if many people know that, you can, when you connect ChatGPT or Gmail, it doesn't just read email. You can send email from ChatGPT, draft this, cool, send it. There's so much capability in there. So I think that'll be one of the many features we're going to see.
Super app this week, yes or no?
I don't know. I think you get the model out first, then you get the super app out. I don't think you stack too many engineering headaches on top of each other.
I think the super app's close. I can feel it coming.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different stuff that's popping up online of people going into the current code for the updates on Codex and on ChatGPT Atlas, and they're seeing little changes. I got pushed a new auth system over the weekend, and now
I got you reached model capacity.
Yeah,
errors.
There's things are being changed. Things are morphing. So whether or not this is the move that they make a bunch of changes and then they settle and then you launch it, who knows? But or where they are in the process there, we have obviously no idea. But I would think that is, it feels closer now than it has in the past. And I don't know. I continually remain in awe of Codex's raw power. It is just something special.
Yeah.
And I'm extraordinarily excited to play around with the new models, because the new models are more powerful and faster and smarter than 5.5.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's the biggest quality of life improvements for me right now. I mean, certainly intelligence would be great, but the two things, if you ask me to focus on right now, better, longer context understanding. Like, that's really better, longer context understanding. Because when I run into mistakes, it's not because the model didn't know it. It's because 3 million tokens ago, I told it not to do a thing.
Yeah.
But it's still remarkably good. Like, I don't notice compacting anymore. I'm not restarting threads as often.
It's a thing that just went away and nobody really talked about it. I think I saw some kind of periodically, the posts that get the most traction on the Claude and ChatGPT subreddits are like, "Are you switching from X to Y or whatever?" And there was a Claude person who was like, "Oh, like I'd like to switch to Codex, but their token window isn't what it should be, and Claude is a bigger token window." And everybody in the sub was just like, "Don't worry about it, dude. It's compaction makes everything fine. You can just go forever." And it just kind of got solved somewhere along the road.
Yeah, speed is the thing that, other than I want a smarter model, but I'm telling you my biggest work, implications right now, speed, waiting for stuff to complete. And then the idea that sometimes really long threads, it drifts a bit. And I have to go like, no, remember this, which again, again, here's the thing. Be like, well, you can just, I'm the one that say like, you can just create a document and tell it to do this. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I can also just sit here and say, build a better model, build a better harness, guys, come on, as the arguably first person to ever build a harness for GPT-3 like this. That's my claim to fame, back in my time. So we're going to talk about the 800-pound panda in the room.
Let's talk about the Chinese models. Of course, GLM2 getting the biggest reaction recently, but as a lot of the conversations around token maxing, the age of token maxing has passed. Now is the age of token efficiency. The lonely eyes of the world turn toward open source models, some of which can run locally. Many of the best are Chinese. Maine, you've been chomping at the bit on this one. What do you got to say?
Well, I mean, it just comes down to this. Here's the thing. And I don't have a horse in this. I mean, other than wanting America to win. But sure. What does win mean? And win means free enterprise, these things too. So it's complicated. I just had to write a newsletter to my VC fund update and point out like, hey, I've got to make a case for something that I don't agree with, but I need to make the case for it, because a lot of times people are happy to explain they disagree without making the case, and then your disagreements isn't really helpful. So here's the situation. Anthropic builds Mythos, part of their preparedness. The preparedness team, you guys kind of did your job. You warned people, and the government said, oh, scary model, we need to do something. And then we went through several months of this whole situation. Finally, Anthropic expends every effort they can. They'd already, after the DOW one, hired every conservative think tank they could, which I would love to hear those conversations.
Our partners, one of the best MAGA aligned lobbyists, Anthropic hired.
Yeah, the first step is Anthropic's negotiator like, show up with a Yellowstone belt buckle. What do you mean? Just do it. Just do it.
It's fine. It's okay. Taylor and I were talking at the UFC fight, and he was telling me.
Rip Wheeler wouldn't stand for this. So anyhow, you have to learn how to be coded. But anyhow, went through all this effort. Now there's this talk. We talked about the idea that, opening eyes, maybe hinted the Trump administration. What if we gave the government 5%? I love, by the way, the media cover was like talking about giving the Trump administration 5%. I'm like,
I'm sure they would. The American government.
Sure, Trump and the administration would love if it worked out that way, but that's not really what's going. Let's not, because it's a thing. I think the people who are most upset by that title would actually really like the reality of it, which is this. So anyhow, when you're literally talking about Frontier American AI Labs having to bend over backwards, having to go to Washington, go talk to as many people as they can, and do full court press to get their model approved, and talk about the idea of what if we give you part of the equity in our companies, whatever, jump through all these hoops because security people are extremely, extremely concerned. In my adventures in Washington, I will tell you, China. That is the threat. That is the concern. And the other shoe that's going to drop is going to be export controls for Chinese models. is just it is predictable. It is inevitable. If you're making American companies do this, and if Chinese models are saying, look how capable we are, and if people are saying, I would say best estimates, Chinese models are really 7 months behind. It hasn't really changed. They haven't really closed the gap in some way people think. And that if you actually look at real performance, not just benchmark performance, real performance, that seems to be consistent. But guess what? 7 months ago, we had some really good damn models. 7 months from now means Chinese models are Mythos and GPT 5.6 class, whatever, which means, guess what, folks? That's serious. Does you play the game? Does the administration do nothing? Does the administration, take off a hands? Because the biggest people and biggest proponents of tech are like, hey, we love the open source models, because if you don't want to pay the tax to Anthropic or OpenAI, you don't want to have to pay them. And if you think that, because that thing comes down to is like, are tokens subsidized or not? It really depends, because when you try to run one of these models on a GPU, you actually some performance gain, not necessarily. You find out these things are, they may be, pricing may not be as elastic as some cynics want to say. But long story short, let's say the small models, though, there is efficiency gains. There is cheaper. It is much cheaper to run those smaller models.
Let me ask you this. If you're going to export control Chinese models, what does that look like? Like all of these hosting sites that run any kind of model, like, all right, so they got to delist them. You are not able to access their website to download them directly off their website. Like, how does that functionally look like in an open source ecosystem?
Well, it depends how severe they want to go. Okay.
Yeah.
Very least, you're going to have to get a permit or an export license to be able to make it available. There's going to be a new category because these things face this. And the fact that they said, hey, we did this to American labs, you got to do this too, which means you have to now do all this kind of compliance with us, which brings up the question. If they can say, we need compliance, we need internal metrics, we need to do this sort of stuff. If you're a Chinese company, do you say, yes, I want to do this? Because even though I think that a lot of these models are built upon huge amounts of distillation of both taking OpenAI and Anthropic tokens and building a model on top of it, which will get you a great model, and IP theft, there's also brilliant people in China who are super, super smart, who've developed their own techniques and their own methods and their own efficiencies, et cetera. And it's not a matter of just going, you add those things together, which is why they're able to perform as well as they have. So if you're a Chinese lab, you're asked to open the kimono, but wrong culture, but you get the reference, we're intact. If you're asked to share and share that, how much are you going to want to do? Is it worth it? And so number one is which means that they can't officially release it, right? Second thing comes into, though, it's not like the government just says, well, you can't do it. And then Alibaba's like, we'll slip you the GP, we'll slip you a hard drive under the border and it'll be fine. No, what'll happen then is Amazon Bedrock, Azure, Google, none of the CoreWeave, none of these big providers, it'll be say like,
they will not host these models. And so now it effectively becomes,
it'll be legally saying
legally
you cannot host it. Screwed. Yeah, legally you cannot host it.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, I can host up my own computer. And the government will be like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever, who cares? That's not the threat. So that's what I think will happen, is I think that we're going to probably see something to come in place and say that models can't be above a certain size or whatever. You can't do that. If you think that that's bad, fine. The question is, and there is the strict, anarcho-capitalist thing like, hey, government shouldn't be involved in this at all. Which, as much as I would like to, as a guy, me, I'm also like, I can't tell you some of the biology stuff, like some of the hacking stuff, that more takes one. There's some risks that like the hacking stuff is real, but I'm also like, well, that involves one person decided to go do it. The bio stuff is a little bit more riskier and scarier because it's like, we've seen examples of that before. So, I'm not as easy to rush out and defend the ability to go release that kind of thing. So point is, I think we're going to see something soon. I think we're going to see some sort of thing, and I think it's going to have repercussions.
It feels like there's kind of a coming line of a meeting in the middle of some of the, crudely defined acceleration versus deceleration or safetyist argument versus lack of restrictions, that some of the capabilities are something that we should take a look at, or we are expecting the government to take a look at.
Yeah, I have friends that have been working on frontier biology models, and I've said that you need to take those people seriously, because when the guy inside the nuclear power plant says, "Hey, here are some things you need to think about." Okay, the person outside of the picket sign, whatever. The guy inside going, here's the thing. Then I might pay attention. And when it's literally the engineer designers doing it, not saying, believe them all the time, because a lot of times those people, they have Oppenheimer syndrome, whatever. Point is it is worth, it's not a thing I would hand wave away. And I'm like, I would listen to the people involved. Here's the thing too, is with the open source stuff, is that you'll hear arguments, and I might make it one day, and then the other day I'll make the opposite argument. Is you can say, hey, if we ban Chinese models for US whatever, then we could lose our advantage. Yeah. Here's the question though, and I'm gonna steel man this though, because I'm very much let people have the cheapest thing to have and build on top of it kind of guy. Yeah. That being said, when Chinese AI industry really does draft off of frontier American labs, that is clearly the argument, very, very clearly so. That is very much that's how it is what the United States did to catch up with England in the 19th century with textiles, whatever. England went and export stuff, so we built our own, and actually built an industrial base that superseded theirs, whatever. These are the warnings I tell other people too, by the way. Russia didn't have access to United States thermonuclear technology. So what do? They figured out how to build really big rocket boosters and own space launch for decades. And so I'm a believer that there are all these unintended consequences. But I would say this, is that if you're Dario or Sam, and you're saying, and you're the ones pushing the frontier, and the frontier really costs billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to do this. Have the Chinese labs moved it faster or slowed you down? And the argument for moving it faster would be, and the problem is people are like, DeepSeek found this thing, whatever. I'm like, I'm going to tell you a lot of those discoveries.
Controversial in certain places.
Yeah, some of them may not.
And the mission itself specifically.
Yeah, I think there's some real ones, but I've seen some ones heralded out there that I'm like, I think I saw this in the Slack 2 years before.
There are some very big grimaces from people at certain frontier AI labs when you talk about we know people who are not inclined to be this, but who will let. And I personally can tell you, I've seen this before. But there are real discoveries. But I'd say the argument to be made is that, hey, one of the things that helps, one is that if there is one of the things is demand for talent, right? And if you're saying, hey, listen, if OpenAI and Anthropic and DeepMind are trying to compete for talent, and if companies are draining talent away to go work at other places because they can leapfrog using Chinese models, then you're saying, no, I would have access to better talent. If you're saying cost-wise, if you look at the numbers, if you look at OpenRouter and you look at the amount of money flowing to providers of Chinese models, it's huge now. It's caught up considerably. And that comes out of Anthropic's pocket, comes out of OpenAI's pockets, comes out of their pockets. When you hear these models say that this is capable, and you'll see people saying, we switched over to these Chinese models, okay? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Let me be very, very clear. It's not saying it's right or wrong. Yeah. From a purely economic point of view, if you're DeepMind, Anthropic, or OpenAI, you might be looking F that. Ban those models, because the more money we have coming into us, the faster we move the frontier, because we're the one doing the bleeding edge. And, and the less, whatever, the thing is, it doesn't mean it stops the Chinese labs. I'd say that it does, an extent that it would be a big ding to them if they don't have they are making money too, selling model access, things like this too. And I think that one of the things too is it's like you'll get we love the Chinese open source models. What's your favorite Chinese frontier open source video model? Well, they don't open source that because that's really expensive to do, and they are doing. I think they're close to the frontier on video models. So I would say that they're at the frontier in video models. Like the Chinese models are. I would say that they're at the frontier in video models. I use Seed Dance a bit, and play with it. It's good for kicking people. If you want to make a video where somebody's kicking somebody else, Seed Dance is the place to go.
I think it's a great model, but let me be very clear. I have found its there's this sort of like the drop off of where it because you can tell where it is and whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that it's not there. There's a lot of these things where, again, I think it's better than what Sora is. I think where Sora was, whatever, it exceeded that. Omni I have not used, but when I look at Omni and steerability and stuff, Omni seems like it's better in steerability and stuff. I'm willing to, but I again, I think CDN's very good. I'll curiously see CDN's 2.5, but I haven't played with CDN's, but I'm like, oh yeah, it was like Midjourney. Like, oh, Midjourney's great. Yeah, it's great for certain kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But when you go outside that.
You want to know what nobody's cracked that Sora was really, really good at is like form and function. You could tell Sora, make me a commercial from the 90s about a toy, and it would be like one shot. It would have the form and function of a toy commercial from the 80s or that's what I call music style thing. The other models are a little bit harder to steer in that direction. Yeah. I found like they're much more, everything's kind of a play or a movie or something like that. There are actors that are doing a thing that you are asking it to do, but it's not like designed from the final form in the way that Sora was able to crack.
Yeah. But again, I think they are highly competitive. Maybe Frontier.
No, they're great. They're great.
Yeah. So I don't want to be. I just want like. Yeah. But so anyhow, I think that the repercussions of that are going to be tremendous and controversial. And Justin and I are heavily involved on technology Twitter, X, and it'll be an apocalypse.
It will be. I mean, if people thought Trump stepping in to get America's best soccer player on the pitch in the World Cup was a big day on Twitter, then wait until AI Twitter finds out that all the Chinese models are banned.
And I think a number of people who have been supportive of administration because it's pro-AI stance, when it turns out that it's pro-American AI, it's going to be a very interesting sort of thing to see what's going to happen, because there are billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars invested by some people who are very heavily supportive of administration, but are invested in
Chinese companies.
The success of a open source community heavily backed by China.
Yeah. One thing we didn't have on the docket that I wanted to ask your opinion on was the viral speech by Alex Karp of Palantir on CNBC. Did you happen to see that?
I watched a few minutes and I'm like, oh, this is Alex Karp doing Alex Karp. I didn't.
Why do you think that guy? Because I had a similar feeling to it. I mean, like if you haven't seen it, he basically makes the argument that the Frontier Labs, which I think he's standing in more for Dario than he is for Sam on that, and he just didn't want to, specifically, paint it, because the larger point that he had was that Palantir is necessary, even if they are not OpenAI or Anthropic, because they are putting an application layer on top of these models, and that is necessary in specifically the military context and the corporate world. But I didn't know why people were reacting to it in the way that they did. They made it sound like it was this like kind of Meltdown. Mr. Smith goes to Washington, kind of thing. But I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that was the framing of it. You hear Meltdown, you see a guy who's very animated, you never heard before, but it's like I am sure that I don't think that a certain part of Twitter has really discovered Palmer Luckey. Like I think that Palmer does these interviews, these banger interviews. He's a great interview and he's got some great takes on stuff. And I don't think he's reached sort of mainstream. People kind of don't know who he is. There's a couple personalities out there. And Alex is one of these guys, because if first time you see Alex, like, oh, this guy kind of comes off, a bit, it's almost a mad professor, but just sort of like,
he's abrasive.
Yeah.
Like that is part of his personality. Yeah. And Palantir is a company that's unapologetic in what they do. He is not there to play politician. He is there to explain why his company is important. And he obviously has very strident political opinions.
Yeah, and it's a company, too, that now, given the investment by Anthropic and OpenAI and forward deployed engineers, which is what Anthropic has been doing for, This is what Palantir's been doing for over a decade, long time at it. Certainly, I feel like it's got more competitive. And I think that a lot of the times they liked it when they provided the model. I mean, the other companies provided the model and Palantir built the harness and provided the engineering. I think the heat's been turned up there, but we'll see. They're like Palmer's a guy that with the right phrasing, Palmer would probably go this. Jared Isaacman. Dude flew his personal jet over the 4th of July for Washington, D.C., right? Barely a mention. Barely anybody realized. Our current head of NASA literally has his own private Air Force and is a pilot, has been to space multiple times, and is an incredible story unto himself, success story. But he's one of these things like, I don't think the public has any concept of who this guy is or what's going on. And
so what do you think about that idea, though, just in general, that, I don't know, Palantir does seem like it has cut itself a pretty healthy part of, these certain markets, these corporate and military markets. Do you think that the Frontier Labs are gunning for that? Like,
yeah, you want, you start by selling tokens.
Yeah.
Then if somebody's reselling your tokens at a much, much higher rate, then you go for that. And that is what happens. Yeah. We saw this with, first was AI systems. GPT-3 was a good classifier and it went for the classification sort of market. Then it got better, transcription. Then it got coding. And then a lot of writing tasks. And then when they got good at code, and we said this before, Anthropic realized, hey, the thing about code is coders are expensive. So if you're selling a model for coders, you can make it expensive. And they've been building expensive models there because the markup's phenomenal. So anywhere where there is a huge markup on the output that people are doing with this tech, first is, can you replace anything with a model? Second is, if I provide the model and the human doing the task, then maybe I want to be doing that.
Yeah.
So, or supplant it or whatever. So, if Anthropic is competing with, if Palantir is going in to sell their tokens, is getting $1 billion contracts for $1 million token budgets, you go after that market. They're both open and Anthropic are both big enough now.
You could not have written a better cautionary tale for Palantir's existence than everything that happened between Anthropic and the Pentagon. That's the reason why you want a Palantir, so you were not directly dependent. I mean, that's the thing. It was kind of got lost in that entire thing, was that this was not about Anthropic having. I mean, they had contracts, they had the ability to run these models, but they were a subcontractor to Palantir, and that was part of what the Pentagon was blanching at. Was like, wait a minute, like. Number one, a contractor coming to us with these demands is out of pocket. A subcontractor coming to us with these demands is, insane.
Yeah.
But
and
that was their position.
Yeah, and Palantir wants multiple AI companies competing with each other, because they want to get the best terms.
Yeah. All right. Well, a big week. As always, again, come on down to Freedom Fest. If you are going to be in Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, then come say hello. I'm curious how many attention mechanism folks we see down there. I suspect a few. I know at least one or two that have mentioned that they're going to be there. So I'm excited to meet all of you guys. Andrew, where can people find you?
AndrewMain.com.
And you can find me, Justin R. Young, everywhere you find Justin R. Youngs on the internet. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.